It is the year 1348, or perhaps 1215, or 1453. The specific date matters less than the feeling in the room. The air is cold, the stone walls are damp. A candle flickers, casting long, dancing shadows against the tapestry. A man, perhaps a king, perhaps a clerk, perhaps a frightened mayor, sits at a heavy wooden table. He is tired. The world outside his window is in chaos. There is a war that will not end. There is a sickness in the air. There is a shortage of grain. He needs a solution. He needs it now. And so he writes. He drafts a law. He orders a wall to be built. He invents a tax. He creates a rule. He whispers to himself, "This is just for now, just until the winter passes, just until the war is over, just until things go back to normal." He believes it. He truly believes that what he is doing is temporary, a stopgap, a bandage on a wound. He dips his pen, signs the parchment, and blows on the ink to dry it. He extinguishes the candle. He goes to sleep, believing that in a year or two his temporary measure will be forgotten. He was wrong. We often think of the past as a foreign country, a distant land that we have left far behind, separated from us by an ocean of time. We look at paintings of people in velvet robes and iron armor, and we see strangers. But look around you, right now. Look at the shape of your room. Think about the layout of the city or town where you sleep. Consider the coins in your pocket or the way you pay your taxes. Think about the words you use when you greet a stranger. They are ghosts. They are echoes. We are not living in a new world. We are living in the ruins of their temporary decisions. We are walking through the fossilized remains of their panic. The way a university is organized, the reason a jury has 12 members, the very width of the streets in our greatest capitals, these were not grand designs. They were accidents. They were the temporary fixes of the Middle Ages that simply never went away.
It is a strange comfort, isn't it, to know that the permanent structures of our lives, the things that seem as solid as granite, the institutions that seem like they have existed since the dawn of time, are actually just forgotten emergencies. They are the scaffolding that no one ever bothered to take down. In the chaos of the Middle Ages, amidst plagues, wars, and shifting borders, kings and commoners alike were constantly reacting. They did not have the luxury of long-term planning. They lived in a world of immediate needs. They built temporary walls to stop a specific army. They levied emergency taxes to pay for a specific battle. They formed provisional guilds to manage a sudden shortage of labor. They expected these things to vanish when the crisis passed. They expected the walls to crumble, the taxes to be repealed, the guilds to dissolve. But institutions are sticky things. Once a door is opened, it is very hard to close. Once a coin is collected, it is very hard to give back. Once a wall is built, it dictates where the road must go, forever. Tonight, we are going to trace these lines. We will drift back to the time of castles and cathedrals, but we are not looking for the famous battles or the legendary romances. We are looking for the mundane, the bureaucratic, the small, quiet moments where a temporary fix hardened into a permanent reality. We will walk through the ruins of the temporary to find the foundations of our permanent world. So, let go of the present day. Let the worries of your own temporary problems fade away. They too will pass, or perhaps they too will become part of the landscape, softened by time until they are just another layer of history. The candle is lit, the parchment is ready, the ink is wet. Close your eyes, take a deep breath. Let us go back to the beginning, to the moment when the temporary became forever.
The year is 991, or perhaps 1012. The exact year fades into the gray mist of the North Sea, but the feeling remains sharp. It is the feeling of dread. Imagine standing on the coast of East Anglia. The air is cold, biting at your exposed skin. The sky is the color of bruised iron. You are looking out at the water, straining your eyes against the fog. And then you see them. The dragon heads, the long ships. They do not come as a single vessel, but as a forest of masts, rising and falling with the swell of the gray ocean. The Vikings have returned. For generations, the response to this sight was steel. You would light the beacons, you would gather the feared, the local militia. You would sharpen your axe and prepare to die in the mud for your king. But this time, the king is tired. The land is tired. The treasury is empty of spirit, if not of gold. King Aethelred, known to history as the Unready, a mistranslation of unrod, meaning ill-advised, looks at the approaching fleet. He knows he cannot win. The Vikings are professional killers. His men are farmers who want to go home to their harvest. So a new idea is born, a temporary idea, a desperate stopgap measure to make the nightmare go away. He will not fight them. He will buy them. He calls it the Danegeld, the gold for the Danes. It sounds simple, a transaction, a bribe. You pay the bully to leave the playground. You give the wolf a leg of mutton so he does not eat the sheep. The king's advisors nod in agreement. It is just for this season, they whisper, just until they leave, just until we are strong again. We will pay them this once, and then we will return to the old ways. But to pay an army of thousands, you need more than a few chests of gold. You need 10,000 pounds, 20,000 pounds, amounts of money that the human mind can barely comprehend in an age where a single silver penny is a day's wage. Where does this silver come from? It does not grow in the king's garden. It comes from the land. It comes from the people. And so, the panic of the invasion is replaced by a different kind of panic, the panic of the collection. The king sends out his riders. They are not carrying swords to fight the Vikings. They are carrying ledgers. They are carrying empty chests. They are riding to every village, every hamlet, every lonely farmstead in the kingdom. They demand a contribution, a tax, an emergency levy to save the realm.
It is temporary, the riders say, their breath misting in the cold air. Give us your silver, and the Vikings will go. Next year, you will keep your coin. The farmer reaches into his hiding spot beneath the floorboards. He pulls out his small bag of clipped coins. He hands them over. He watches the rider gallop away, the chest rattling in the saddlebag. He feels a sense of relief. He has bought his safety. He has paid for peace. He does not know it yet, but he has just participated in the birth of a monster. He has fed a beast that will never, ever stop eating. Let us close our eyes and focus on the physical reality of this transaction. We live in a world of digital numbers, of invisible money moving through the air. But in the Middle Ages, tax is heavy. Tax has weight. Tax has a smell. The Danegeld must be collected in silver pennies, small irregular discs of metal stamped with the king's face. They are dirty. They are worn smooth by thousands of thumbs. They smell of sweat, of soil, of old leather purses. Imagine the sheer logistics of moving 20,000 pounds of silver. This is not a figure of speech. This is actual weight. A horse can only carry so much. A cart can only hold so much before the axle snaps. The roads of England become rivers of silver, all flowing toward the king's treasury in Winchester. The sound of the country changes. Underneath the lowing of cattle and the ringing of church bells, there is a new sound, the heavy, grinding rumble of tax carts. They arrive at the treasury. Strong men heave the chests off the wagons. The wood groans. The iron hinges shriek. And then the counting begins. This is where the bureaucracy takes root. You cannot simply dump the silver in a pile and hand it to the Vikings. You must know exactly how much you have. You must know who paid and who did not. You need a system. Enter the scribe. He sits at a high desk, his back bent like a willow branch. The room is dim, lit only by expensive beeswax candles that do not smoke. The air is thick with the smell of iron and parchment. He dips his quill into the ink pot. The ink is made from oak galls, growths found on oak trees, crushed and mixed with iron salts. It is dark, permanent, and acidic. It bites into the parchment. Scritch, scratch. He writes the names of the shires, the names of the hundreds, the names of the hides of land.
Beside him, the counters are at work. They do not count in their heads. They count with their hands. They pour the silver onto the table. The sound is a chaotic crash, like hail on a tin roof, settling into a dull rattle. They sort the coins. They weigh them. In this era, the currency is the weight. If a coin has been clipped, if someone has shaved off the edges to steal a sliver of silver, it is worth less. The counters must weigh every batch. They use scales that creak softly. They place the silver in one pan and the standard weights in the other. They watch the needle tremble. They add a coin. They remove a coin. Balance. The scribe records the weight.
The collector presses the blade into the wood. He leans into it. The wood resists, then gives way. A curl of hazel shaving falls to the floor. He carves the notches. Then the magic happens, the security measure. He takes the stick and splits it down the middle, lengthwise. The wood cracks open, revealing the pale, unpolished grain inside. Now he has two halves, two sticks that match perfectly. The notches on one side align exactly with the notches on the other. The grain of the wood is unique, like a fingerprint. You cannot forge a tally stick. If you try to replace one half, the grain will not match. The notches will not line up. One half is given to the sheriff, the man who collected the tax. This is the stock. It is where we get the term stockholder. The other half is kept by the exchequer. This is the foil. When the sheriff comes to the treasury to prove he has delivered the money, he presents his stock. The treasurer retrieves the foil.
They bring the two pieces of wood together. Click. They fit. The notches align. The transaction is verified. Imagine a room filled with thousands of these sticks, bundles of hazelwood tied together with leather thongs, stacked floor to ceiling. They are the receipts of the nation. They are the physical manifestation of the king's promise. I have taken your money, and here is the proof. The sound of the exchequer is the sound of dry wood clattering against dry wood. It is a dry, hollow sound, a forest of debt harvested and stored in the dark. This system was supposed to be for the emergency, for the war, but the system is efficient. It works. And the men who carve the sticks, the men who split the wood, they are becoming powerful. They are the keepers of the king's memory. We move now to the heart of the machine, the room where the final accounting happens. It is called the exchequer. Why that name? It sounds mysterious, almost magical, but it is named after a tablecloth. In the center of the room stands a massive table, 10 feet long and 5 feet wide. It is covered with a dark cloth, perhaps green or black, and on this cloth, sewn in white thread, is a grid, a pattern of squares. It looks like a chessboard, a giant, somber chessboard. This is not for a game. It is an abacus, a calculator for people who use Roman numerals. Roman numerals, I, V, X, L, C, M, are terrible for mathematics. Try to divide MCCXL by XIV in your head. It is impossible. So they use the board. Twice a year, at Easter and Michaelmas, the great ritual begins. The High Treasurer sits at the head of the table. The Chancellor is at his side. The scribes are poised with their wax tablets and parchment rolls. And the sheriff sits at the bottom. He is the player on the other side. The treasurer takes out counters, small discs of bone or stone. He places them in the squares of the cloth. The column on the far right is for pennies. The next is for shillings. The next for pounds. Then scores of pounds. Then hundreds. Then thousands. The silence in the room is absolute. All eyes are on the movement of the hands. The treasurer moves a counter. Clack. He slides another across the fabric. Swish. He is calculating what the sheriff owes. He is subtracting what the sheriff has already spent on the king's behalf, repairing a castle wall, buying grain for the army. It is a visual dance of mathematics. The counters move across the checkered field like soldiers. They cluster in the thousands column. They retreat to the shillings. The sheriff watches, sweating in his wool tunic. If the counters do not balance, if the pile of silver he brought does not match the pattern on the cloth, he is in debt to the king, and the king's debt is not forgiven. This room, with its checkered cloth and clicking stones, is the brain of the state. It is calm, it is orderly, it is hypnotic. And it was built for a crisis. It was built to process the Danegeld. But look at it. Look at the complexity. Look at the rows of scribes, the stacks of tally sticks, the specialized furniture, the trained experts who know how to read the cloth. Do you think the king will dismantle this? When the Vikings finally leave, when the longships turn back to Scandinavia, their holds heavy with English silver, the king looks at his exchequer. He sees a machine that can extract wealth from every corner of his land. He sees a way to know exactly how many sheep are in Yorkshire, how many bushels of wheat are in Kent. He thinks, the Vikings are gone, but I still have needs. I have castles to build. I have daughters to marry off. I have other enemies. The emergency has passed, but the tax remains. The Danegeld was eventually abolished in name, but it was simply replaced. The machinery of collection did not rust. It was just repainted. Let us cross the narrow channel of water to France a few centuries later. The logic is the same, but the scale is grander. It is the 14th century, the 100 Years' War, a war that, true to its name, felt like it would last forever. The King of France needs money to fight the English. He calls the Estates General, a gathering of the nobles and the people. He pleads with them. The English are burning the villages, he says. I need an army. I need to pay the soldiers. Grant me a tax, just for this year, just for this campaign. The people agree. They are terrified of the English longbowmen. They are terrified of the chevauchés, the raids that burn everything in their path. They agree to the tie, a direct tax on every household, a cut of their wealth. It is, once again, an exceptional measure, a wartime necessity. But the war drags on. It stops being a crisis and starts being a condition of life. Children are born who know nothing but the war. They grow up, have children of their own, and die, and the war is still happening. For the bureaucracy, this is a golden age. The tie becomes regular. It becomes annual. It becomes expected. The King of France realizes something profound. In the beginning, he had to ask permission to collect the tax. He had to beg the Estates General. But after 20 years, after 30 years, he stops asking. In 1439, King Charles VII passes a reform. He declares that the tie is now a permanent royal right. He no longer needs to call the Estates General to approve it. He can simply decree it. The temporary war tax has become the fundamental source of the king's power. It allows him to keep a standing army, the Compagnie d'Ordonnance. Notice the circle. The tax was created to pay for the army to end the war. Now the tax pays for the army to ensure the king can collect the tax. The snake is eating its own tail. The peasant in the field looks up as the tax collector rides by. The English army is nowhere to be seen. There is no battle today. The sun is shining, but he must still pay. He must pay because the machine exists, because the scribes are sitting at their desks, because the tally sticks are waiting to be carved. The momentum of the bureaucracy is stronger than the peace. The temporary measure has calcified. It has turned into stone. It is now a foundational pillar of the state. Let us drift forward now. Let the centuries slide by like water under a bridge. The armor rusts. The castles fall into ruin. The tally sticks are burned in a stove. A fire that, ironically, burned down the Houses of Parliament in 1834, the ghosts of the tax destroying the seat of power. We arrive in a time that looks more familiar, 1799, London. The enemy is different. It is not the Vikings. It is not the English longbowmen. It is Napoleon Bonaparte. He is the new terror. He is gathering his fleets across the Channel. The panic is the same, the fear is the same, and the solution is the same. William Pitt the Younger, the Prime Minister, stands in the House of Commons. The war is expensive. The national debt is crushing. He needs a new way to raise money, a radical way. He proposes a tax not on land, not on windows, not on salt, but on income. A tax on the very money a man earns with his labor. The outcry is immediate. It is called an intrusion into private life. It is called a tyranny. It is called un-English. Pitt raises his hands. Peace, he says. Peace. This is a war measure. It is strictly temporary. It is for the defense of the realm against the Corsican ogre. As soon as Napoleon is defeated, this tax will vanish.
He writes it into the law. The Income Tax Act of 1799. It has an expiration date. It is tied to the war. And, to his credit, when the war pauses in 1802, the tax is repealed. The people cheer. They burn the tax records. They think the nightmare is over. But war returns, and so does the tax. And then, in 1815, Napoleon is defeated at Waterloo. The great threat is gone. The temporary need is over. But a strange thing happens. The government looks at its books. They look at the massive revenue that the income tax generated. They look at the debts they still owe. They look at the new roads they want to build, the new ships they want to launch. They look at the income tax the way King Aethelred looked at the Danegeld. It takes a few decades of wrestling, of repealing and reinstating, but by 1842, under Robert Peel, the income tax returns during peacetime. It is still called temporary. Peel asked for it for only 3 years, then another 3, then another, until eventually they stopped pretending. Bring your attention back to the present, back to the room where you are resting. Think of the last time you looked at your pay stub, or the last time you filed your taxes. You saw a deduction, a percentage of your labor taken away before it even reached your hands. You accept this. You might complain about it, but you accept it as a fact of life, as inevitable as the sunrise, as permanent as the mountains. But it is not. That deduction is a ghost. It is the ghost of a Viking raid. It is the panic in 991 AD. It is the echo of a tally stick splitting in a cold room in Winchester. It is the legacy of a king who said, "Just for now, just until the crisis passes." The crisis passed 1,000 years ago. The Vikings are gone. Napoleon is dust. But the tax remains. The scribes are still writing. The counters are still moving the stones across the checkered cloth. The machine that was built to save us became the machine that owns us. And as you drift off to sleep, listen closely to the silence of the night. You might just hear it. Scratch, scratch. The sound of the temporary becoming forever. Let us leave the treasury. Let us walk away from the counting tables and the gold. We are going to a place of poverty, a place of cold drafts and hungry minds. It is the year 1150. We are in Paris, or perhaps Bologna. The streets are narrow, choked with mud and the refuse of the city. The air smells of wood smoke and unwashed wool. But if you listen, above the noise of the market and the blacksmith's hammer, you can hear a low hum, a murmuring. It is coming from the Latin Quarter. We tend to imagine the medieval university as a place of grandeur. We picture the dreaming spires of Oxford, the ivy-covered walls of Harvard, the great stone libraries of Salamanca. We imagine silence, dignity, and wealth. But in the beginning, there was none of that. There were no campuses, there were no libraries, there were no dormitories. There was no universitas as a place you could point to on a map. The word universitas did not mean a collection of buildings. It meant a collection of people, a guild. Just as the bakers had a guild to protect the price of bread, and the cobblers had a guild to protect the quality of shoes, the scholars formed a guild to protect the business of thinking. Imagine you are a student in 12th century Paris. You are young,
perhaps 14 or 15. You have traveled hundreds of miles, walking on dangerous roads, driven by a hunger for knowledge. You arrive in the city. You have no place to sleep. You have no money for a house. You find a room in a boarding house, or perhaps just a pile of straw above a garret in a tavern. It is cold. The wind whistles through the cracks in the timber.
Every morning, you wake up before dawn. You wrap your cloak tight around you. You walk through the dark, muddy streets to the school. But the school is not a building. It is a rented room. It might be the back room of a shop. It might be a church porch. It might be a drafty hall rented by a master who charges you a few coins to enter. You step inside. The air is thick with the smell of damp wool and bodies. There are no desks. There are no chairs. You sit on the floor. If you're lucky, there is straw scattered on the stones to keep the cold from seeping into your bones. You sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers, a boy from Germany, a man from Spain, a priest from England. You do not speak the same native tongue, but you all speak the language of the room, Latin. You are waiting. You are waiting for the master. He enters. He is not a wealthy man. His robes are frayed. He walks to the front of the room, where a single, simple lectern stands. On that lectern rests an object of immense power, an object worth more than the building you are sitting in, worth more than the clothes on the backs of every student combined. A book. A single, hand-copied manuscript, bound in leather, written on vellum, the skin of calves. This is the problem. This is the crisis that will define the next 1,000 years of education. Knowledge is trapped in that book, and there is only one copy. In our world, books are cheap. They are everywhere. We drown in paper. But in 1150, a book is a treasure. To make a Bible takes the skins of 300 sheep. It takes a scribe a year of labor to write. You, the student sitting in the straw, cannot afford a book. You will likely never own one in your entire life. So how do you learn? How do you get the information from the page into your mind? You cannot borrow it. You cannot photocopy it. You cannot download it. There is only one way. The temporary solution, the stopgap measure for a world without printing presses. The master opens the book. He runs his finger along the line of text, and he begins to read. Out loud, slowly, deliberately. Lectura. This is the Latin word for reading. It is where we get the word lecture. The lecture was not originally a speech. It was not a performance. It was a dictation. The master reads a sentence. In principio creavit Deus caelum et terram. He pauses. You, the student, dip your quill into your inkhorn. You have a scrap of parchment or perhaps a wax tablet if you are poor. You write down exactly what he said. He reads it again. You check your work. He reads the next sentence. You write it down. Hour after hour, day after day, the only sound in the room is the drone of the master's voice and the frantic scratching of 100 pens. The goal of the lecture was to produce a copy of the book in the mind and the notebook of the student. It was a manual transmission of data, a human printing press. It was slow, it was tedious, it was physically painful. Your fingers would cramp, your eyes would strain in the dim light, the ink would freeze in the pot during winter. But it was necessary. It was the only way to scale knowledge. One book, one reader, 100 listeners. This was supposed to be a temporary fix, a solution to the scarcity of manuscripts. But let us jump forward.
300 years later, in the mid-1400s, a man named Gutenberg invents the movable type printing press. Suddenly, the cost of books plummets. By the 1500s, students can buy their own copies of the texts. The crisis is over. The scarcity is gone. You no longer need a human being to stand at the front of a room and read the text to you. You can read it yourself, in your room, at your own pace. The lecture should have died. It should have vanished along with the scribe and the town crier. But look at a university today.
Walk into a lecture hall in 2024. What do you see? Rows of students sitting in chairs, facing the front. A professor standing at a podium, speaking, while the students take notes. The technology of the book changed. The technology of the world changed. But the temporary solution of the 12th century, the lectura, never went away. We still gather in rooms to listen to someone read, a ghost of a time when we had no other choice. Now let us look at where you sleep. Back in the 12th century, the housing situation for students was dire. They were often teenagers, far from home, living in a city that wanted to exploit them. Landlords charged extortionate rents for rat-infested cellars. Students starved. They froze. They got into fights in taverns because they had nowhere else to go. It was a social crisis. The streets of Paris and Oxford were filled with begging scholars. So wealthy benefactors stepped in, bishops, queens, rich merchants. They wanted to do a good deed. They wanted to buy their way into heaven by helping the poor. They decided to buy a house, a simple house. They would endow it with a small amount of money to pay for bread and beer. They would set up a few rules: be home by curfew, speak Latin at the dinner table, pray for my soul. They called these houses collegium, a collection, a gathering, the college. It was not an educational institution. It was a homeless shelter. It was a hostel for the indigent scholar. Take the Sorbonne in Paris. It was founded by Robert de Sorbonne in 1257. It was established for 16 poor students studying theology. Just 16. It was a temporary refuge to keep them alive while they attended the lectures down the street. Take Merton College in Oxford or Peterhouse in Cambridge. These began as small domestic arrangements, a kitchen, a dormitory, a hall for eating. They were stopgaps. They were meant to solve the problem of high rent and student poverty. But something strange happened to these temporary hostels. Because they were charities, they were given gifts. A rich alumnus would die and leave his library to the college. A king would grant the college a piece of land in the countryside to farm, so the students would have a steady supply of wheat. A bishop would donate a silver plate. The centuries ticked by. The students came and went, but the college remained. The land they owned increased in value. The libraries grew. The silver piled up. The temporary hostel began to accumulate wealth that rivaled the church itself. They built stone walls to keep the townspeople out. They built chapels that looked like cathedrals. They built dining halls with hammer beam roofs and stained glass windows. The college stopped being a place for the poor. It became a fortress of privilege. The original purpose, to house the desperate, was buried under layers of tradition and gold. But the structure remained: the communal dining,
The curfew, which existed in Oxford till the 20th century, the fellows living together in a closed community. The modern university campus, with its dorms, its meal plans, its enclosed quadrangles, is the direct descendant of these early medieval homeless shelters. Let us step inside one of these early college libraries. It is quiet here. The silence is heavy, like a blanket. The air is cool and smells of old things. The sweet almond scent of decaying paper, the sharp tang of iron gall ink, the dust of leather bindings. In the early days, the library was not a place for browsing. It was a fortress for books. The books were so valuable that they were not placed on shelves as we know them. They were laid flat on sloping desks, and they were chained. Picture a long iron chain attached to the heavy wooden cover of the book and locked to a metal rod running along the desk. You could pick the book up, you could open it, you could read it, but you could not move it more than 3 feet. The chained library.
It was a security measure, a temporary response to the extreme value of the object. Imagine the sound of this room. Clink, rattle. A scholar turns a page. The chain drags across the wood. Scritch. He takes a note. The light comes from tall, narrow windows. There are no candles allowed here. Fire is the enemy of the book. So the library is dictated by the sun. When the sun sets, the work ends. The library sleeps. This atmosphere, this reverence, this hush, this idea that learning requires a specific, consecrated space separated from the world, was born here. The books are no longer chained. You can take them off the shelf. You can even take them home. But the feeling remains. Walk into a university library today. The Bodleian, the Widener, the reading room of the British Library. The silence is the same. The rows of desks are the same. The feeling that you are entering a temple is the same. We built these spaces to protect physical objects that were rare and fragile. Now, the information is in the cloud. It is everywhere. It is indestructible. But we still build the temples. We still crave the silence. We still feel that to truly think, we must go to the room with the books. The temporary security measure became the permanent sanctuary of the mind. Finally, look at the people in this room. Look at the scholar. What is he wearing? He is wearing a long woolen gown. It reaches his ankles. It has long, billowing sleeves. He wears a hood that he can pull up over his head. Why? Is it a uniform of intelligence? Is it a symbol of his degree? No. He is wearing it because he is cold. Remember, these early lecture halls and college rooms had no heating. There were no fireplaces in the lecture rooms. Glass windows were expensive and rare. Often the windows were just open slits with wooden shutters. If you sat still for 3 hours listening to a lecture in February in Paris, you would freeze to death without layers of heavy wool. The academic gown, the capa clausa, was a coat. It was functional. It was a blanket with sleeves. The hood, it was a hat to keep your head warm. The long sleeves, they were often used as pockets or even as muffs to keep your hands warm when you weren't writing. It was a temporary adaptation to the climate and the architecture. But time passes, glass windows are installed, fireplaces are built, central heating arrives, the drafty halls become warm and comfortable. The need for the heavy woolen gown vanishes. But do the scholars take them off? No. They keep them.
They embroider them. They make them out of silk instead of rough wool. They color code them to represent different subjects. The coat becomes a costume. The survival gear becomes a symbol of status. Watch a graduation ceremony today. Watch the procession of professors. They are walking in the clothes of a 12th century monk who is trying not to freeze. The mortarboard hat? It evolved from the biretta, a soft cap worn by clergy, which itself evolved to keep the head warm and provide a flat surface to take off easily. We are looking at a fossilized wardrobe. Let us sit in the back of the lecture hall now. The candle is burning low. The master has finished his reading. He closes the great book with a heavy thud. The students stretch their cramped fingers. They blow on their hands to warm them. They gather their scraps of parchment.
They stand up, their gowns rustling softly. They shuffle out into the dark, narrow streets of the medieval city, heading back to their cold rooms in the college. They believe they are just getting through the day. They believe they are just solving the problems of the moment, where to sleep, how to get the text, how to stay warm. They do not know that they are building the blueprint for the next millennium of human thought. They do not know that 1,000 years later, in a world of electric light and digital screens, we will still be sitting in rows. We will still be listening to a lecture. We will still be walking through the campus. We will still be wearing their coats. The lesson is over, but the structure remains. Let us stand in the center of a field. It is the year 1200, or 1350, or 1529. The location is Vienna, or Paris, or perhaps a smaller town like York or Avignon. The mood is panic. News has arrived from the east or the south. An army is marching. A siege is coming. The horizon is no longer a place of possibility. It is a source of danger. And so the city makes a decision born of immediate, terrifying necessity. It decides to shrink. It decides to wrap itself in stone. They begin to build a wall. This is not a fence. This is a mountain rearranged by human hands. Listen to the sound of the construction. It is the sound of urgency. Masons are working by torchlight. Farmers are dragged from their fields to mix mortar, a slurry of lime, sand, and water. Scrape, slap, thud. Stone upon stone, block upon block. They dig a deep ditch, the moat. They pile the earth up to create a rampart. They face it with granite or limestone. The wall must be high, 30 feet, 40 feet. It must be thick enough for 2 men to walk abreast on the top, patrolling the perimeter. It is a massive engineering project, likely the largest thing these people will ever see, and they build it with the singular focus of survival. They believe that this wall is a temporary shield. It is a response to this war, this enemy, this season of violence. They think, when the war is over, we will be safe, we will expand again. But stone is heavy. Stone is permanent. Once you lay a foundation that is 10 feet deep and 20 feet wide, you do not simply dig it up because the treaty has been signed. The wall is finished. The gates are hung, heavy oak reinforced with iron bands. The portcullis is raised. The city is now a fortress. It is safe, but it is also a prison. Imagine the psychological shift. Before the wall, the city could breathe. If a family grew, they could build a house on the edge of the meadow. If a merchant needed a warehouse, he could build it near the river. Now there is a hard line. The city ends here, at the wall. Everything inside is valuable.
Everything outside is dangerous. So what happens to the organism of the city when it is placed in a corset of stone? It begins to suffocate. It begins to mutate. The population continues to grow. People flock to the city for protection behind the walls, but the land area is fixed. It cannot expand by a single inch. So the city does the only thing it can do. It grows upward. This is the birth of the medieval skyline. This is why the old towns of Europe look the way they do. Walk with me down a street in medieval Paris. It is not a street as we know it. It is a canyon. The houses are narrow, squeezed together like books on a shelf. To maximize space, the builders use a technique called jettying. The second floor sticks out a few feet over the street. The third floor sticks out further than the second. By the time you reach the fourth floor, the houses on opposite sides of the street are almost touching. They're leaning in for a kiss. This blocks out the sky. Down on the cobblestones, it is twilight at noon. The air is stagnant. The smells of cooking, of animals, of waste are trapped in these stone tunnels. The wall has created a pressure cooker.
The geometry of the city becomes a maze. There are no straight lines. Straight lines waste space. The streets wind and twist, following the property lines of ancient gardens that have long since been paved over. It is intimate, it is cozy, but it is also crushing. And looming over everything, at the end of every long vista, is the wall, the gray, silent barrier, the limit of the world. For 300, 400 years, the wall dictates everything. It dictates the price of rent. It dictates the flow of air. It dictates the sunlight. It was built to keep the enemy out, but it succeeded in locking the future in. But life is persistent. It spills over. Not everyone can afford to live inside the stone corset. The rents in the city center are too high. The guilds are too exclusive. So a new phenomenon appears, a temporary settlement. Just outside the heavy wooden gates on the edge of the moat, the poor begin to build. They build shacks, they build workshops, they build inns for travelers who arrived after the gates were locked for the night. They are living in the shadow of the wall. If an army comes, they are doomed. Their homes will be burned, often by the city defenders themselves, to clear the line of sight for the archers. But they stay. They accept the risk for the cheaper rent. This area gets a name. In French, the city is the bourg. This area is outside the bourg. Force le bourg. It evolves into the word faubourg, the false city. These faubourgs are temporary. They are flimsy. They are meant to be abandoned at the first sign of dust on the horizon. But the wars become less frequent. The temporary shanty towns become permanent neighborhoods. They develop their own character. They are wilder, freer, less regulated than the city inside. In London, the theaters, like Shakespeare's Globe, are built in the liberties, the areas just outside the jurisdiction of the city walls. In Vienna, the Vorstädte, the before cities, sprawl out across the plain. But there is a strange gap, a dead zone. Between the wall and the faubourg, there must be empty space. The military demands it. You need a clear field of fire. You cannot have a house built right up against the rampart, or an enemy could use it to scale the wall. This empty space is called the glacis. Imagine a wide grassy slope, a ring of green silence separating the crowded vertical city on the inside from the sprawling chaotic suburbs on the outside. For centuries, this is the shape of the world. The dense core,
the wall, the silent, empty glacis, the faubourg. It is a geometry of defense, a geometry of fear. Time moves forward. We drift into the 17th and 18th centuries. The technology of death changes. The trebuchet and the battering ram are replaced by the cannon, the mortar, the howitzer. A stone wall, no matter how thick, is no match for modern artillery. A high wall is actually a liability. It is just a bigger target. The military engineers realize this. They stop building high walls. They start building low, star-shaped forts buried in the earth. The great medieval walls of Paris and Vienna become obsolete. They are no longer protecting the city. They are just there. They become relics, dinosaurs of stone, sleeping in the sun.
Moss begins to grow on the ramparts. Ivy climbs the towers. The moat, once filled with water or sharpened stakes, fills with stagnant mud and trash. The wall becomes a nuisance. It blocks traffic. The gates are bottlenecks where carts get stuck for hours. It becomes a tax barrier, the octroi. The city government uses the old gates not to stop armies, but to stop farmers. If you want to bring a basket of apples into Paris, you have to stop at the gate and pay a tax. The wall is now hated. It is a symbol of the old feudal order. It is a symbol of restriction. But it is still there. Millions of tons of stone. Who has the money or the energy to move it? So it sits for another 100 years. The city grows around it. The wall is like a scar tissue that won't fade. It is a temporary defense that has outlived its purpose by 3 centuries. It is a ghost made of granite. Then comes the moment of alchemy, the moment where the lead is turned into gold. It is the mid-19th century. The Industrial Revolution is in full swing. The cities are choking. They are dirty, crowded, and disease-ridden. In Paris, Emperor Napoleon III and his prefect, Baron Haussmann, look at the map. In Vienna, Emperor Franz Joseph looks at the map. They see the same thing. They see the wall. And they see the glacis, that wide, empty strip of land that circles the city. They realize that the wall is not an obstacle, it is an opportunity. It is the only place in the entire crowded city where you have a continuous, unbroken strip of land. Tear it down, they say, and in its place, do not build houses, do not build factories, build a road. But not just a road, a promenade, a place for walking, a place for air, a place for trees. This is the birth of the boulevard. The word itself is a ghost. Boulevard comes from the Dutch-German word bulwark, a defensive rampart. When you say, "I am walking down the boulevard," you are literally saying, "I am walking down the bulwark." You are walking on the military fortification. In Vienna, they are even more literal. They call it the Ringstrasse, the ring street. Watch the transformation. The heavy stones are pulled down. Some are used to fill the moat. The ground is leveled. Where the dark, damp shadow of the wall once fell, they plant rows of linden trees, chestnuts, plane trees. Where the soldiers once marched on the ramparts, peering out into the darkness for enemies, ladies in crinoline dresses and men in top hats now stroll, twirling parasols. The glacis, the killing field, becomes a park. The faubourgs, the false cities, are finally stitched to the center. The city becomes one organism. But the scar remains. The shape of the city has been dictated by the wall. Look at a map of Paris today. Look at the map of Vienna or Moscow or Beijing or Milan. You see the rings.
the Peripheric in Paris, the Ring in Vienna, the Garden Ring in Moscow. These are not natural roads, they are circular. Roads are supposed to go from point A to point B. These roads go from point A back to point A. They are the footprints of the walls. The traffic that flows around Paris today, the endless stream of headlights moving in a circle, they are tracing the exact line drawn by a frightened king in the 13th century. They are following the path of the patrol. So the next time you are in a great European city, or even looking at one on a map, look for the circle. Go to the wide tree-lined avenue, the one with the grand cafes and the opera house. Stand in the middle of the sidewalk, close your eyes, listen to the cars, listen to the wind in the trees, and then imagine the stone. Imagine that beneath your feet is the foundation of a tower. Imagine that the open air where the traffic moves was once a solid barrier of masonry. Imagine that the cafe across the street is in the false city, and you are standing on the edge of the true city. The wall is gone, the panic is gone, the siege is a forgotten memory, but the city remembers. The city cannot forget. The temporary shield became the permanent artery. The barrier became the boulevard. And we are still walking the beat, round and round, following the ghost of a wall that was supposed to be temporary. Let us go back to a time before evidence, before lawyers, before the concept of reasonable doubt, before the idea that human beings were capable of judging one another. It is the year 1160. You have been accused of a crime. Perhaps you stole a sheep from the common land. Perhaps you were seen arguing with a merchant shortly before he was found dead in a ditch. Perhaps you are simply disliked by the village elder. You stand before the court, but the court is not looking for witnesses. They are not interested in your alibi. They are not interested in the mud on your boots or the blood on your tunic. They are interested in the will of God. You face the trial by ordeal. Let us look closely at this ritual. It is not a mob punishment. It is a liturgy. It is a solemn, terrifying religious ceremony. There is the ordeal of fire. You are brought into the church. The priest is there. The iron bar, 1 pound or 3 pounds, depending on the crime, is heating in a brazier of charcoal. You can smell the metallic tang of the heat. You can feel the warmth radiating against your face. The priest blesses the iron. He prays that God will not allow the heat to burn the innocent. You must pick it up. You must hold the red-hot metal in your bare hand. You must walk 9 measured paces. 1, 2, 3. The skin hisses. The pain is absolute, but you cannot drop it. You must reach the mark. Then you drop the iron. Your hand is immediately wrapped in cloth and sealed with wax by the priest. You are led away to a cell. For 3 days you wait. You sit in the dark, nursing your throbbing hand. On the 3rd day, the seal is broken. The bandages are removed. The court leans in to look. If the wound is healing cleanly, if the flesh is pink and healthy, God has protected you. You are innocent. If the wound is festering, if there is pus or rot, God has rejected you. You are guilty. Or perhaps you face the ordeal of water. This is even more primal. You are taken to a pond or a river, the cold water. You are stripped. Your thumbs are tied to your toes, trussing you into a ball. You are thrown in. The logic is spiritual. Water is a pure element. It is used in baptism. It accepts only the pure. If you sink, the water has accepted you. You are innocent. The crowd will hopefully pull you out from the rope before you drown, though accidents happen. If you float, the water is rejecting you. It is spitting you out. You are guilty. There was even the ordeal of the morsel for the clergy. A priest accused of a crime would be given a piece of consecrated bread and cheese. If he could swallow it, he was innocent. If he choked, he was guilty. This was the legal system of Europe for centuries. It was terrifying. It was absolute. It relieved human beings of the terrible burden of judgment. No judge wanted to send a man to the gallows on a hunch, but if the water floated him, that wasn't the judge's fault. That was God's verdict. But there was a problem. It was slow. It was messy. It was unpredictable. And frankly, it was beginning to make the king uneasy. King Henry II of England is a man of systems. He is a bureaucrat in a crown. He is a man of ink and ledgers, not miracles and prayers. He looks at his kingdom and sees chaos. He sees land disputes dragging on for years because everyone is waiting for a priest to bless a pond. He sees murderers walking free because their hand healed well. He needs a way to know the truth, not the spiritual truth, but the practical truth. Who owns this field? Who burned down that barn? Who is the man in the village that everyone knows is a thief? He does not need a miracle, he needs a census. And so, in 1166, at the Assize of Clarendon, Henry II creates a new tool. He does not call it a jury in the way we think of it. He calls it an assize, a sitting, a session. He orders his sheriffs to go out into the villages. He tells them, don't ask God, ask the neighbors. The instruction is specific. The sheriff must go to every hundred, a subdivision of a county, and every village. He must gather a group of men, 12 of the most lawful men of the 100, and 4 of the most lawful men of every village. Put them under oath, juré in French, from which we get the word jury, and then ask them a question. Is there any man in your village who is a robber, a murderer, a thief, or a receiver of thieves? This is not a trial. This is a data collection exercise. These men, these jurors, are not there to judge guilt or innocence. They are there to inform on their neighbors. They are human surveillance cameras. Yes, they say, whispering in the cold air of the village green, we know John the miller, he steals grain. We know William, he was seen with the stolen sheep. The sheriff writes the names down. This group is the ancestor of the grand jury, the jury that accuses. It was an administrative convenience. It was a way for the king to bypass the local lords and the local biases and get a straight list of criminals. It was efficient. It was brutal. If this jury named you, you were arrested, you were seized, and then you were sent to the ordeal. The jury was just the filter. They were the ones who decided who to hold the hot iron. But let us look at the men chosen for this task. Why were they chosen? Because they knew things. Today, if you are called for jury duty, you are asked, do you know the accused? Do you know anything about this case? If you say yes, you are sent home. We want a blank slate. We want impartiality. But in the 12th century, it was the exact opposite. You were chosen because you knew the accused. You were chosen because you were his neighbor. You were chosen because you knew if he beat his wife, if he paid his debts, if he was a drunkard. You were the witness and the accuser wrapped into one. The king's judges, the terrifying justices in air, would ride into a county once every few years. Their arrival was a catastrophe for the locals. It meant fines. It meant questions. It meant the king was looking at you. The judges would sit on their high benches. The sheriff would bring in the 12 men. What do you know? The judge would ask. And the 12 men would speak. They would spill the secrets of the village. It was a mandatory gossip system, a temporary committee of locals rounded up to answer a few questions, point a few fingers, and then go back to their plows. They were never meant to have the power of life and death. They were just supposed to make the list.
Then the world changed. It did not change with a battle. It changed with a piece of paper. In November 1215, the Pope, Innocent III, convened the Fourth Lateran Council in Rome. It was a massive gathering of the Church. They discussed crusades. They discussed heresy. But then they looked at the legal system of Europe. They looked at the trial by ordeal. They saw priests blessing boiling water. They saw priests inspecting burns. And they decided it was wrong. It was tempting God. It was forcing a miracle on demand. It was a superstition that had no place in the enlightened 13th century. The Pope issued a decree, Canon 18. It forbade any member of the clergy from participating in a trial by ordeal. No priest could bless the iron. No priest could bless the water. Without the priest, the ritual was just torture. It had no legal standing. It had no spiritual weight. The decree traveled slowly across the Alps, across France, and across the Channel to England. When it arrived, the legal system collapsed. Imagine the panic in the courts of Westminster. The judges are sitting on their benches. The dungeons are full of prisoners, men accused by those local juries of stealing sheep or murdering travelers. They are waiting for their trial. They are waiting for the water or the fire. But the priests have walked away. The braziers are cold. The ponds are just ponds. The machinery of judgment has stopped. The judges look at each other. How do we decide? If we hang a man without the ordeal and he was innocent, we are murderers. We will go to hell. But if we let them all go, the kingdom will fall into anarchy. They needed a solution. They needed it immediately. They needed a temporary fix to clear the backlog of cases while they figured out a new system. They looked around the courtroom. They saw the sheriff. They saw the scribe. And they saw those 12 men. The 12 locals, the ones who had accused the prisoner in the first place, or perhaps a new group of 12 from the same village. The judges shrugged. They had no other option. They turned to the 12 men and said, "We cannot ask God anymore, so we will ask you. You decide. You tell us if he is guilty." It was a terrifying moment. These were farmers, blacksmiths, millers. They were not lawyers. They were not theologians. They were terrified of making a mistake and damning their own souls. "Us?" they asked. "But we are just men. We cannot see into his heart. Only God can see into his heart." "Do it anyway," the judges said. "We need a verdict." This was the birth of the petty jury, the trial jury. It was an accident. It was a scramble to fill a vacuum left by the Pope. It was supposed to be a temporary administrative substitute for the judgment of God. Let us enter the room where these 12 men are sent. It is the year 1300. The temporary measure has stuck. The judges realized that blaming the neighbors was much easier than blaming themselves. But the process is brutal. The 12 men are locked in a room. The judge's order is strict. They are to be kept without meat, drink, fire, or candle. No food, no water, no heat, no light. Why? Because the system still craves certainty. In the old days, the ordeal gave a clear answer, innocent or guilty. There was no hung jury in the eyes of God. So the new system demanded the same absolute. The verdict must be unanimous. All 12 must agree. If 11 men say guilty and one says innocent, that is doubt, and the medieval mind cannot handle doubt. Doubt is dangerous. Doubt suggests the system is flawed. So they must be forced to agree. The starvation method was a test of endurance.
The verdict often went to the side with the strongest bladders, the thickest coats, or the strongest stomachs. If they still couldn't agree, the judges would sometimes employ a technique called carting. The judge would pack up his court to move to the next town. He would take the 12 arguing jurors, throw them in a rough open cart, still without food or water, and drag them along the bumpy roads behind him until they came to a decision. It was a verdict by attrition.
Listen to the sound of that room. The shuffling of feet on the stone floor, the coughing, the low, angry whispers in the dark. He did it, I tell you. I saw him near the barn. But he is a good man. He fixed my plow. I cannot send him to hang. We need to go home. My cows need milking. I am hungry. Just say he is guilty. The verdict, veredictum, to speak the truth, was often a compromise born of exhaustion. But once the door opened and the 12 men walked back into the court, blinking in the light, they spoke with one voice: guilty or not guilty. The judge accepted it. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask for their reasoning. In fact, for centuries, jurors were not allowed to explain their verdict. It had to be inscrutable, like the voice of God. If they explained it, it opened the door to argument. If they just said guilty, it was a fact. The king accepted it because it shifted the moral burden. If an innocent man hanged, it wasn't the king's fault. It wasn't the judge's fault. It was the neighbor's fault. The temporary fix became the ultimate shield for the state. Centuries pass. The legal system evolves. We introduce lawyers to argue the case. We introduce rules of evidence to stop mere gossip from being used. We stop locking jurors in rooms without food, mostly. We stop choosing people who know the accused and start choosing strangers to ensure impartiality. But we never change the number. 12. Why 12? Why not 10? Why not 15? Why not an odd number like 11 to prevent a tie? There is no statistical reason. A jury of 9 would work just as well. A jury of 15 might be more accurate. But the number 12 has become sacred. It has become a superstition. It started as a convenient number for a clerk in 1166. It was a number that felt complete. There are 12 apostles. There are 12 tribes of Israel. There are 12 signs of the zodiac. There are 12 hours in the day and 12 hours in the night. It is a number that feels solid. It suggests a full circle, a complete set. But as the temporary jury became permanent, legal scholars tried to invent reasons for the number. They tried to make it sound mystical. In the 14th century, a legal guide claimed the jury represents the 12 prophets who foretold the truth. In the 17th century, the great jurist Lord Coke argued that 12 is a number of abundance and cosmic order. They were making up reasons after the fact. They were trying to justify a decision made by a bureaucrat who just wanted a manageable group size. We are still trapped in that bureaucrat's decision. Walk into a courtroom today, in London, in New York, in Sydney, in Toronto. Look at the architecture. Look at the box. Count the chairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 12 seats. The wood is polished mahogany or sleek modern laminate. The upholstery is comfortable. There's air conditioning. There are microphones. But the geometry is medieval. We still ask 12 random citizens to pause their lives. We still compel them to sit in judgment. We still lock them in a room until they agree. We call it the bulwark of liberty. We call it the highest duty of citizenship. We revere the jury as a symbol of democracy. But if you strip away the modern varnish, you see the scaffolding of the 12th century.
You see the panic of the Pope's decree. You see the rush to find a substitute for the hot iron. You see the king's desperate need to clear the docket. We are using a spare part from a feudal engine to run a modern democracy. So the next time you receive that letter in the mail, the summons, the jury duty, do not think of it as a modern inconvenience. Do not think of it as a bureaucratic annoyance. Think of it as a summons to the Middle Ages. You are being asked to step into the shoes of a peasant in a muddy field in 1166. You are being asked to fill the void left by a miracle that never happened. You are the temporary fix that became the permanent conscience of the state. You sit in the box. You listen to the evidence. You watch the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light from the high window. The judge looks at you. The lawyers look at you. The accused looks at you. They are all waiting for the magic number. 12 voices, 1 truth. The gavel strikes. Thud. The sound of a decision that was never meant to be yours.
But they do not understand the disease. They do not know about bacteria. They do not know about fleas or rats. They only know one thing. Proximity kills. If you are near the sick, you die. So they make a decision, a ruthless, geographical decision. They look at the map of the Venetian lagoon. They see the small, uninhabited islands scattered in the gray water. Islands like Santa Maria di Nazareth. They seize the island. They declare it a zone of exclusion. They order that anyone showing symptoms, the fever, the swelling buboes, must be taken from their homes. They are put on small boats. They are rowed out across the misty water, and they are dumped on the island. They call it the Lazaretto. The name comes from a corruption of Nazareth and Lazarus, the patron saint of lepers. It is not a hospital. There are no doctors there to cure you. There is no medicine. It is a holding pen. It is a waiting room for death. The Senate believes this is a temporary measure, a crisis response. We will use the island until the plague passes, they say. Then we will burn the huts and return the land to the church. But the plague does not pass. It returns again and again. In 1348, in 1423, in 1576. The temporary wooden huts on the island are replaced by stone. The Senate builds long, narrow halls to house the dying. They build high walls to keep the sick in and the healthy out. They create a new kind of architecture, the architecture of separation. Listen to the sound of the Lazaretto. It is quiet. The city of Venice is noisy, filled with merchants and bells. But here, on the island, there is only the wind and the water. The sick lie in rows. They are separated from the world. They have been excised from the body of the city like a tumor. This concept, that the sick belong in a special, separate place, far away from daily life, is new. In the ancient world, you were sick at home. You died in your bed, surrounded by your family. It was a sonic wall, a way to create a temporary bubble of isolation wherever he walked. The sound warned people to step back, to hold their breath, to look away. The leper had to live in a hut outside the city walls, a temporary structure on the edge of the road. But as the centuries passed, these huts became permanent. They became institutions. In England alone, there were over 300 leper hospitals by the year 1250. They were built with a specific design, a long hall with beds arranged in rows along the walls, and at the end of the hall, a chapel.
The patients could lie in their beds and watch the priest say Mass without moving. This design, the long open ward with the nurse's station or altar at the end, became the blueprint for the Western hospital. When leprosy declined in Europe, these buildings did not disappear. They stood empty. And then the cities found a new use for them. They put the poor there. They put the mad there. They put the unwanted there. The Hôtel Dieu in Paris, St. Thomas's Hospital in London, many of these great institutions trace their roots back to these places of exclusion. The hospital, from hospice, meaning guest or host, began as a place of shelter, but the architecture of the hospital, the rows of beds, the isolation from the city, the strict control of movement, comes from the leper colony. It comes from the desire to separate the clean from the unclean.
Let us move forward to the 18th and 19th centuries. The plague is gone. Leprosy is rare. But a new killer is stalking the cities. Tuberculosis, consumption, the White Plague. And the old fear returns, the fear of bad air, miasma. The doctors believe that disease is carried in stagnant, foul-smelling air. So they look at the hospital, and they decide it needs to be a machine for ventilation. They take the old design of the lazaretto, the long separated pavilions, and they refine it. They build the pavilion-style hospital. Imagine a long corridor. Branching off it are separate wings. Each wing is surrounded by gardens. Each wing has huge windows on both sides. The goal is cross-ventilation, to sweep the bad air out and bring the good air in. This is the Nightingale ward, named after Florence Nightingale. She wrote, "The very first requirement in a hospital is that it should do the sick no harm." And to her, harm meant stagnant air. So the hospital becomes a place of obsession with hygiene, with whiteness, with airflow. The walls are tiled so they can be washed. The floors are polished stone. The furniture is metal, not wood, so it doesn't harbor rot. It is a stark, cold aesthetic. It is the aesthetic of the lazaretto updated for the industrial age. Walk into a hospital today. What do you feel? You feel the separation. You walk through the sliding glass doors. The air changes. It is cooler. It smells of antiseptic, the modern version of the vinegar they used to wash the coins in the plague times. You are processed. You are given a wristband, a modern tag like the leper's bell. You are stripped of your clothes and given a gown, and you are isolated. If you have a contagious disease, you are put in a negative pressure room. The air is sucked out so it cannot escape into the hallway. It is the same logic of the Venetian island. It is the same logic of the leper's hut. We have just replaced the stone walls with air filters. We have replaced the moat with a glass partition. The temporary measure of the 14th century to seize the sick and hold them apart until they are either cured or dead has become the permanent structure of our healthcare system.
There is a specific type of silence in these places. Let us close our eyes and listen to the sound of a sanitarium in the 1920s, a place built for tuberculosis patients high in the mountains. The air is thin and cold. The building is white. There is a row of deck chairs on a terrace. Patients lie there, wrapped in wool blankets, breathing in the freezing air. They are waiting
just like the sailors in the harbor. They are waiting for the cure. The silence is profound. Talking is discouraged. Excitement is dangerous. The prescription is rest. Absolute, total rest. Rustle. A nurse turns a page of a book. Clink. A glass of milk is placed on a metal table. Hiss. The wind moves through the pine trees. This is the quarantine of the soul. It is a place where time stops. The busy world of the city, the taxes, the wars, the ambitions, is far away. Here, there is only the rhythm of the body, the temperature chart, the pulse rate, the breath. For many, this temporary exile became a permanent life. They lived in the sanitarium for years. They created their own society, their own rules. And when antibiotics were discovered and tuberculosis was cured, these great white buildings were not torn down. They were repurposed. They became mental asylums. They became luxury spas. They became conference centers. But the ghosts remain. If you visit an old hospital building or an converted asylum, you can still feel it. The geometry of isolation, the long hallways that seem to stretch into infinity, the heavy doors with the small glass windows, the echoing stairwells. These buildings were designed to control, to monitor, to separate. They were built by people who were afraid, people who wanted to build a wall between the healthy us and the sick them. So tonight, as you lie in your bed, safe in your home, think of the concept of the sick room. When you have a fever, you retreat, you close the door, you draw the curtains, you lie still. You are enacting a ritual that is thousands of years old. You are creating your own personal lazaretto, your own micro-quarantine. You are listening to the echo of the Venetian Senate. You are following the rules of the leper colony. You are waiting, waiting for the fever to break, waiting for the 40 days to pass, waiting for the ship to be allowed to dock. The crisis is temporary. The sickness will pass, but the room remains, the bed remains, and the silence of the quarantine, that deep, heavy, suspended silence, is always waiting for you. Let us imagine a road. It is not a modern road. It is a track of beaten earth winding through a forest in 14th century Burgundy, or perhaps the misty moors of northern England. The trees are tall and thick, the light is fading, the air is cold and smells of damp leaves and wood smoke. You are traveling alone, or perhaps with a single servant. In this world, there is no police force, there are no street lights, there is no 911. You are entirely responsible for your own survival. Every shadow could be a bandit, every rustle in the bushes could be a wolf. And then you see him. A figure approaches from the opposite direction. He is mounted on a horse. He is wearing a cloak. You can see the glint of metal, a sword at his hip, or perhaps the tip of a lance. Your heart begins to hammer against your ribs. This is the primal moment of the Middle Ages, the encounter. Is he a friend? Is he a foe? Is he a mercenary looking for an easy purse, or a knight on a holy quest? You do not know, and he does not know you. As you draw closer, the tension becomes a physical weight. Your hand drifts instinctively to your own belt, to the dagger hanging there. Your muscles tense. You are ready to fight. You are ready to kill to stay alive. But fighting is dangerous. Even if you win, you might take a wound that will fester and kill you weeks later. So both of you want to avoid violence. You both want to pass in peace. But you need a signal.
You need a way to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you are not about to strike. You need a language of the body, a language of safety. You stop your horses. You are 5 paces apart. The mud squelches under the hooves. The horses snort, their breath pluming in the cold air. You look at the stranger. He looks at you. And then you perform a ritual, a series of movements that have been codified by centuries of paranoia. You reach out your hand. You touch your head. These are not gestures of friendship, not yet. They are inspections. They are the physical receipts of peace. They are the temporary measures taken by 2 frightened men to ensure they survive the next 5 minutes. Let us focus first on the right hand, specifically the right hand.
For the vast majority of human history, and for the vast majority of the population, the right hand is the weapon hand. It is the hand that holds the sword, the hand that draws the dagger, the hand that throws the spear. It is the hand of death. When you meet a stranger, your eyes immediately go to his right hand. Is it hovering near his hip? Is it hidden inside his cloak? If it is hidden, you are in danger. He could be gripping a knife, ready to lunge. So the first rule of the encounter is, show me your hand. You extend your right arm, you open your palm, you show that it is empty. Look, the gesture says, no iron, no stone, nothing. But showing is not enough. A man can be quick. He can produce a knife from a sleeve in the blink of an eye. So you go a step further. You neutralize the weapon hand. You ride closer, you reach out, and you grasp his right hand with your right hand. This is the handshake. In the Roman era, this was often a forearm clasp. You would grab the other man's arm just below the elbow. Why? To feel for a dagger hidden in the sleeve. It was a pat-down, a security check. By the Middle Ages, it had evolved into the clasping of hands. Think about the mechanics of this. When you lock hands with another man, you are physically disabling him. You are holding his weapon hand hostage, and he is holding yours. It is a mutual pact of immobilization. I cannot draw my sword if you are holding my hand, and you cannot draw yours if I am holding your hand. But why do we shake? Why the up and down motion? It is not for enthusiasm, it is gravity. If a man is hiding a small knife or coin or a rock in his palm or up his sleeve, the shaking motion is designed to dislodge it. Shake, shake, shake. If something falls out, the truce is broken. If nothing falls out, the hand is empty. It is a vibration test, a way to ensure that the empty hand is truly empty. Imagine the sensation of a medieval handshake. It is not the dry, polite grip of a modern business meeting. It is skin against skin, often dirty, calloused, cold. You are gripping the hand of a man who might have killed someone yesterday. You are squeezing tight, not out of affection, but out of fear. You are testing his strength. You are watching his eyes. The handshake is a parley. It is a momentary ceasefire. It is a temporary measure. As soon as you let go, the danger returns. You back away slowly. You keep your hand near your hilt until you are well past him. But for that brief moment of contact, you created a bridge of safety. Now, look at the head. The stranger is a knight. He is wearing armor. Armor is heavy. It is hot. It is claustrophobic, but it is necessary. He is wearing a helmet, perhaps a great helm, a bucket of steel with narrow slits for eyes, or perhaps a bassinet with a hinged visor.
When the visor is down, he is a machine. He has no face. He has no expression. You cannot tell if he is smiling or snarling. You cannot tell if he is looking at you or looking at your purse. He is anonymous, and anonymity is dangerous. An anonymous man can kill without conscience. Furthermore, the helmet is his defense. It protects the most vulnerable part of his body, his eyes and his brain. So, how does he prove to you that he is not a threat? How does he prove that he trusts you? He makes himself vulnerable. He reaches up with his right hand, again showing it is empty. He grabs the lip of his visor. Creak, clank.
He lifts it. He exposes his face. This is a profound gesture. He is voluntarily removing his armor. He is saying, I am exposing my eyes to you. I am giving you a clear shot. I trust that you will not take it. It is an act of disarmament. It also serves a practical purpose, identification. It is me, the face says. I am Sir Robert. I am not a bandit. This gesture, the hand to the helmet, the lifting of the steel, became the universal sign of non-aggression among the warrior class. If you rode past another knight and didn't lift your visor, it was an insult. It was a threat. It meant you were ready for battle. But if you lifted it, you were signaling peace. Now, watch the centuries pass. The armor begins to disappear. Gunpowder makes the heavy steel plate obsolete. The knights trade their helmets for hats. Feathered caps, tricorns, top hats, bowlers. The danger of the arrow in the face is gone, but the muscle memory remains. When a gentleman meets a lady, or a superior, or a friend, what does he do? He reaches up, he grabs the brim of his hat, and he lifts it. He doffs his cap. Doff is short for do off. Why? He is not wearing a visor. He does not need to expose his eyes. But the ghost of the knight is guiding his hand. The ritual of the temporary safety check has become the ritual of politeness. The military salute is the same ghost. Watch a soldier salute. The hand snaps up to the brow. The palm is open, showing no weapon. The fingertips touch the edge of the cap or the helmet. It is a stylized, abbreviated motion of lifting a visor. Every time a soldier salutes a general, he is reenacting a meeting on a muddy road in 1350. He is saying, I am lifting my steel mask to show you my face. The steel is gone. The mask is gone, but the hand still rises. Let us move from the hand and the head to the sleeve. Look at the cuff of a jacket, a suit jacket or a military tunic. What do you see? Buttons, usually 3 or 4 small buttons sewn in a row near the wrist. Try to use them. Try to unbutton them. On most modern suits, you cannot. They are fake. They are sewn shut. Even if they work, what do? They open the cuff slightly. But why? You don't need to roll up the sleeves of a suit jacket. They are useless. They are decorative. But they were not always useless. They were born from a very specific, very gross, temporary problem. The problem of the runny nose. Let us travel to the battlefields of the 18th and 19th centuries, the armies of Frederick the Great of Prussia or Napoleon Bonaparte of France. It is winter. The campaign is brutal. The soldiers are marching through the snow. They are freezing. They are sick. They are peasant conscripts. They are not refined gentlemen. When a soldier has a runny nose and he is holding a musket, what does he do? He cannot reach for a handkerchief. He wipes his nose on his sleeve. It is a natural reflex, but the generals hate it. First, it is undisciplined. Second, and more importantly, it ruins the uniform. Uniforms are expensive. They are made of dyed wool, indigo blue, scarlet red. If thousands of soldiers are constantly wiping mucus on their cuffs, the uniforms become filthy. They stain, they rot. The army looks like a rabble. So, the legend goes that a general, perhaps Napoleon, perhaps Frederick, ordered a temporary modification to the uniforms. Sew brass buttons on the sleeves, not for fastening, but as a deterrent. Imagine the sensation. You are a soldier, your nose is running, you instinctively bring your arm up to wipe your face. Scrape! The cold, hard metal buttons drag across your raw, wind-burned skin. It hurts. It is uncomfortable. You stop doing it. You learn to use a rag. The buttons were a behavior modification tool, a temporary disciplinary measure to save the cost of wool. But then the fashion stuck. The war ended, the soldiers went home, but the tailors kept sewing the buttons on. Why? Because it looked military, it looked sharp, it implied that the wearer was a man of discipline. The buttons migrated from the battlefield to the ballroom. They appeared on the coats of bankers, lawyers, and politicians. Today, you buy a suit for a wedding or a funeral. You pay hundreds of dollars for it, and there on the wrist are those 3 or 4 little plastic or horn buttons. They serve absolutely no purpose. They do not close the sleeve. They do not hold gloves. They are there because a Prussian soldier in 1750 had a cold. They are the fossilized remains of a sneeze. Let us bring all these threads together. The handshake, the hat tip, the buttons. We live in a world that prides itself on being modern. We think we are rational. We think we have moved beyond the brutality of the past. But look at us. Watch 2 businessmen meet in a glass-walled conference room in Tokyo or New York. They are wearing suits. The suits have buttons on the sleeves that do nothing, buttons that remember the freezing mud of a Napoleonic campaign. They stand up. They reach out their right hands. They clasp. They shake. They are performing a safety check for daggers that aren't there. They are locking weapon hands that have never held a sword. They nod their heads, a micro-gesture of the hat tip, which is a micro-gesture of the visor lift. They are exposing faces that are already visible. We are not modern men. We are historical reenactors. We are walking around in the costumes of our ancestors, performing the rituals of their survival. The civilizing process, as the sociologists call it, is just the slow transformation of fear into manners. Etiquette is not about being nice. Etiquette is about not scaring people. Please and thank you are the verbal equivalents of showing your empty palms. Holding the door open is a way of showing you are not trapping someone. We are still the frightened traveler on the lonely road. We are still the soldier trying to stay warm. We are still the knight trying to prove he isn't a killer. The danger has faded. The wolves are gone. The bandits are gone. But the muscle memory is deep. It is in our bones. It is in the very fabric of our clothes. We cannot let go.
So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, think of the texture of these things. Think of the cool, smooth brass of a button. Think of the heavy, oiled steel of a visor hinge. Think of the rough, warm grip of a hand. Imagine that you are that traveler. The encounter is over. The stranger has passed. You have shaken hands. You have tipped your head. The ritual is complete. You are safe. The road ahead is clear. The mist is closing in behind you, hiding the past. You can let your hand drop from your belt.
You can relax your shoulders. You can unbutton the cuff of your day, even if the buttons are just for show. The armor is heavy, but you can take it off now. You can lay down the sword. You can lay down the shield. The temporary measures have done their job. You have survived another day. Now there is only the quiet, the dark, and the sleep that waits for us all. And so we reach the end of our journey through the ruins of the temporary. We have seen how the panic of a single moment can echo for 1,000 years. We have touched the coins collected for a war that is long forgotten. We have walked the boulevards built on the footprints of fear. We have felt the phantom squeeze of the handshake, reaching out across the centuries to check for a weapon that is no longer there. The world you live in is a museum of these forgotten emergencies. The things that seem solid, the laws, the buildings, the manners, are just the shadows of old anxieties. The permanent is simply the temporary that refused to leave. Now, turn your mind inward. Think of the worries that burdened you tonight, the deadlines, the fears, the urgent needs of your own life. They feel heavy. They feel like stone walls. They feel like they will last forever. But they are not. Like the wooden ramparts of Vienna, they will crumble. Like the fear of the plague, they will fade. Or perhaps they will simply transform. They will become the boulevards of your future. They will become the quiet, unnoticed rituals of your days. You do not need to solve them tonight. You do not need to build a fortress. You do not need to levy a tax on your peace of mind. You only need to rest. Let the history sleep. Let the ghosts return to the mist. Unclench your hands. You are not holding a sword. Lower your shoulders. You are not wearing armor. Close your eyes. You do not need to watch the horizon. The road is safe. The siege is over. The past is a foreign country, and you have left it behind. The future is not yet written. There is only now. The dark, the quiet, the peace. Let the temporary wash over you. Let it drift away until there is nothing left but the eternal silence of sleep. Good night.